With regard to food shortage, yes, we did talk about food shortages. And it's going to be real. The price of these sanctions is not just imposed upon Russia. It's imposed upon an awful lot of countries as well, including European countries and our country as well. And because both Russia and Ukraine have been the breadbasket of Europe in terms of wheat, for example, just to give you one example. But we had a long discussion in the G7 with both the United States, which has a significant, the third largest producer of wheat in the world, as well as Canada, which is also a major producer. And we both talked about how we could increase and disseminate more rapidly food shortages. And in addition to that, we talked about urging all the European countries and everyone else to end trade restrictions on sending limitations on sending food abroad. And so we are in the process of working out with our European friends what it would take to help alleviate the concerns relative to food shortages.
Before I share some data-driven insights on the state of our global food systems, let me tell you a little bit about Grow Intelligence. Grow is a company founded to help tackle two of the greatest challenges we face as humanity: food security and climate change. Official government agency estimates from around the world put wheat inventories at 33% of annual consumption. Verifiable data from public and private sources that we as a company organize and then build statistical models to connect the dots between in our platform show that global wheat inventories are in fact closer to 20%, a level not seen since the financial and commodity crisis of 2007 and 8. We currently only have 10 weeks of global consumption sitting in inventory around the world. Conditions today are worse than those experienced in 2007 and 8. It is important to note that the lowest grain inventory levels the world has ever seen are now occurring while access to fertilizers is highly constrained, and drought in wheat-growing regions around the world is the most extreme it's been in over 20 years. Similar inventory concerns also apply to corn and other grains. Government estimates are not adding up. While the next few years are going to likely be difficult as a result of the statistically unusual confluence of the 5 challenges I shared, we can coordinate a global response, eschew to each their own mentality as to food security and climate risk, be willing to have constructive, albeit discussion, at difficult conversations, and jointly accept that what we have to address is less of a food shortage and more of a crisis of prioritization. I thank you.
Look at this. I mean, we've got a 5.2% increase in wheat prices in the last 2 days. Does it mean that further upward pressure is likely to keep on being piled on on agricultural commodities?
Well, one could say so, Richard. Yeah, I think definitely. We've already seen global food costs at a record earlier this year, and the chances are they're going to keep on going higher. What we need is a series of good bumper crops globally to relieve tight supplies, and that's just not in prospect at the moment. And we're seeing increased food protectionism too. This move from India, as you say, over the weekend, and just follows a few weeks after Indonesia banned exports of palm oil. It's the world's biggest producer, and that's sent up prices too. In general terms, the world is extremely prone to erratic weather these days. Over the last 2 years or so, this has become more extreme. We have U.S. production of hard red winter wheat, which is the most widely grown wheat in the U.S., falling to the smallest crop since 1963. We have dry weather problems in Europe. And, of course, above all, we have the war in Ukraine, and that's choked off exports from the European breadbasket. So it's very, very hard to see where any relief is coming from for global food inflation, Richard.
Jim, talk to us about the impact this is having on the wider economy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's feeding through into the inflation narrative. Obviously, energy costs have been very high, and that's also supporting agricultural prices. Food is getting more expensive, and you hear more and more sort of anecdotal stories about people finding flour hard to find, especially in the North African and Middle Eastern countries, which depend hugely on imports of wheat for their supplies. So, it's going to feed through to inflation. It makes the whole interest rate issue much more difficult to deal with for central banks, because they have to, as we've said before, have to see how they can control inflation without producing a recession.
James, does this mean that we're even more subject to weather conditions because of what's happening out there at the moment? And does that mean that there's no way of knowing when we're going to see any respite from high prices?
Yeah, I can only agree with that, Richard. I mean, you have got global warming, you've got climate change, you've got more volatile weather, more erratic weather globally, and has been causing havoc. It was an immense drought last year in Canada, which slashed the wheat crop by about 50-60%. That could rebound this year, but you've had record temperatures, heat wave in India, which is one of the reasons that production has fallen, one of the reasons why they've had to restrict exports. So the world is getting more volatile in terms of weather, and that's feeding through into crop prices and food inflation.